G'day there once again viewers, your mate Kamikaze78 here, and today guys we're going to be talking about this little old game here that dropped a beta over the past couple of days. And no, it's not Call of Duty Black Ops 4, it's Insurgency Sandstorm. This right here, ladies and gentlemen, is a game that I've been keeping my eye on ever since its announcement. As some of you older subscribers will know, I love Insurgency. The first game was an awesome addition to the FPS market, bringing high intensity CQC action, yet mixing it up from the standard run-of-the-mill / run-and-gun playstyle that we tend to see by making simple adjustments that slow down the pace of the game, but not so much to the point where it takes all of the fun out of the game. Adjustments including uncentered hipfire, hyper-realistic damage models, and slow, clunky, yet functional movement that makes you really consider each and every step that you take in the game. Now, when I mention those sorts of things, people tend to think about the armors or even the squads of the gaming world that can at times have you run for minutes in an open field and get shot and killed without even seeing an enemy. Sometimes you may get to fire a weapon, but you won't actually see the enemy because your squad leader just told you to suppress an area, and that's about it. The Insurgency franchise is all about bringing faster-paced, hyper-realistic combat to the gaming sphere in the FPS world. And with Insurgency Sandstorm, we get everything we loved about the first game, but just that little bit more on top to add to the experience. Something that the first game did incredibly well was immerse you in the environment, both visually and audibly. Sure, the simple fact that every single bullet can kill you is enough to make you a little anxious about moving from cover to cover, much how like you would be in a real combat situation, I can imagine, but the audio and visuals just completed the picture, and with Insurgency Sandstorm, this is quite possibly one of the better improvements over the first Insurgency. This game is running on the latest version of the Unreal Engine, and on Ultra settings, this game is quite simply an absolute stunner to look at. Is it on par with stuff from titles like Battlefield 1? Not quite, but I would be happy to say that this game gives a lot of shooters out there a run for their money as far as graphics go. The models look great, and the effects also help to complete the picture that is this high pressure, down and dirty combat environment. The effects of bullets impacting and penetrating surfaces is especially done well. Insurgency also keeps the picture-in-picture scope rendering from the last game, where whenever you're using a zoomed optic, everything that you see through the scope will remain zoomed, yet everything on the outside of the scope will show as normal. This is a very system-intensive process because you're essentially rendering the multiplayer world twice, but irregardless of that, it's a little touch to the game that I absolutely adore. On that note, however, at extended ranges, character movement has a tendency to become a little bit visually janky, which makes shooting or even tracking targets at range an absolute pain if they aren't still, which is something that the devs definitely need to consider. On the note of optimization, the game could be a little bit smoother, and the graphics menu could use a lot more options to tweak your graphics accordingly. There are moments when my game would stall for a brief moment, and the experience frame rate drops, but for an early beta, it isn't all that bad, and the devs have made it very clear that they are improving on optimizations. As a plus, I've had no crashes yet, which I always consider to be a good thing when it comes to a new game being tested in an early beta. And the audio. Fuck me dead, the audio in this game is something else. Just to give you an idea, take a listen to the Mosin Nagant available to the Insurgency Sniper class. In all seriousness, isn't that just one of the filthiest sounds you've ever heard in a first-person shooter? I personally bloody love it. Oh, and the air support. And yes, there is air support in this game, but we'll touch on that a bit later. Sounds pretty dope too. Obviously, the A10 takes the cake for the coolest sound, but I think that's something that you'll need to hear for yourselves. I don't want to rob you of that experience for the first time in the game. I think it's, for your first experience, you need to hear the A10 in this game for yourselves while you're playing in it and while you're fully immersed. So I'm not going to ruin that experience for you. So far as the aesthetics are concerned, the game is ticking all of the right boxes, bar some optimization issues. But how about the gameplay? Well, as I mentioned before, it plays very much like the previous Insurgency game, just better. The gameplay is all objective-based with wave-based respawns that encourage the teams to stick together and move towards completing the objectives as a unit. Shooting mechanics are straightforward, literally with no cone of fire or bullet spread mechanics in play at all. It is simply wherever you've got your barrel pointed, that is where your bullets are going to go. The game also still features that uncentered hipfire mechanic that is from the original game, essentially meaning that while yes, your bullets will always travel where your barrel is pointing, your barrel is most likely always going to be off-centered on your screen. So that means that you're going to have a laser sight on there if you want to ensure you know where your hip-fired shots are going, and there's no cone of fire crosshair on the screen to tell you exactly where it's going to be, so that's something to keep in mind as well. The maps that we have had the opportunity to try in-game thus far have also been very nice as well to play, and at no point have they felt imbalanced towards a certain team in the push mode, which in my opinion is the hardest mode to balance for. They feature enough flanking routes for the attackers to get on the capture points, but a well-placed and spread defensive team can create some incredible choke points. It's very much a cat and mouse situation, which creates for some really interesting gameplay. The maps are also well detailed, with most buildings having interiors, and all materials on the map that look like that they can be penetrated by bullets probably can be. Add in some closable doors and you have maps that feel well made, fleshed out, and from a design perspective are well balanced. So it's really good to see the Insurgency developers really going all out on their map design. But what are the general improvements to gameplay? What are the changes? Well, let's find out. Firstly, there's been a pretty swell expansion to the class customization and a change to the team composition that brings about new roles to the table. Much like the first Insurgency game, you still have access to your standard riflemen, demolitions, marksmen, heavy gunner, and breacher loadouts that all sport their individual gear. It's worthy to note that each and every single class in this game now has access to more weapons than what the previous Insurgency game offered, and there's also more attachments that also, again, look aesthetically pleasing. The weapons and attachments in this game are modeled very, very nicely. In this game, however, we do see some additions to the lineup of the squads in the form of the Advisor, a special ops style unit with exotic weaponry, as well as a commander and an observer. In the original Insurgency, teams were divided up into 2 squads with a leader each. In this game, a team is one single squad with a single commander. Now, a commander has the ability to call in fire support for the team, but must, and I repeat, must have an observer, which is essentially the radio operator back to the HQ, within distance to do so. This means that powerful air support requires at least 2 people in close proximity to call in, and a commander can't just make a beeline for enemy lines and rapidly call it in while dodging bullets or sneaking behind enemy lines all by himself. There's a little bit of balance there behind this fire support. And that lands us on the topic of fire support, and I think this was going to be one of the more controversial additions to the game if there ever was one. Fire support in the game ranges from high explosive, smoke and chemical smoke artillery to A-10 and Apache helicopter airstrikes that can devastate the enemy team if well placed. Now, obviously, the type of fire support that can be called in varies on what team you are playing. The terrorists aren't going to have access to the A-10, don't worry. Meanwhile, the security forces aren't going to have access to chemical artillery. That's a little bit odd for, security forces. The helicopter and A-10 strikes are AI powered, and the helicopter strikes can be countered by small arms and RPGs when needed. Personally, I don't have the hugest problem with them being in the game right now, as they can only be called in when 2 individuals seem to work together, again really emphasizing the teamwork element of this game, and they are pretty rare, as some games you won't see any major fire support missions called in at all. They can also be monumental to actually progressing the game along if there's a massive stall in the flow of the battle, so again, I don't have a massive problem with them. There have been many cases in the old Insurgency where the game has just stalled and become an absolute shit show of a standoff. These sort of fire support missions allow for the game to actually progress if it's well placed. So again, I can see why they've been added to the game. If anything, I actually really enjoy them being in the game, and they add to the immersion for me. The A-10 strike, for example, won't do a Call of Duty and have the A-10 strike over low altitude just so it can quote-unquote look cool for the montage. You will hear it perform a gun run, and if you look up, you will find it at high altitude and long range, pulling away from the battle after it is, spurted its guns. What I actually thoroughly enjoy about these fire support missions is that you will actually hear the A-10 pilot or the Apache pilot report over the radio as to how many targets they've killed, or if they're taking fire or avoiding an RPG. Those small additions to these fire support add-ons just adds to the overall immersion of the game and makes the game feel just that little bit more dynamic. And I really like that the devs haven't half-assed these fire support missions. They feel well placed into the game and how it flows, so that I really enjoy as well. On top of that, we've also seen vaulting added to the game. Hallelujah, that was a huge issue in Insurgency number 1, but right now it's nowhere near where it needs to be yet. At best, it is unreliable, and I've lost count as to how many times I have quote-unquote fielded up a windowsill trying to jump through the damn thing. It will be a nice addition to the game when it's sussed out a little bit more, but right now it is a complete and total mess. Vehicles are also a thing in the game now, but the only vehicle that we are currently testing in the game with the beta is a technical with a 50 cal mounted on the back of it. I imagine we'll see a Humvee, maybe even some light infantry fighting vehicles, which can be fun to see and fun to use in the game, but are often quickly melted by the demolition units on the game if used incorrectly. I'm keen to see if the devs choose to expand on the vehicle element in the final game, if at all, but I guess we'll see later on down the line. Aesthetic customization is also a thing in the game now. I don't think it really needed it, to be quite frank, but hey, you can now customize your operators and your terrorists, if you will. Considering that some of the aesthetic options are giving rarity ratings in the menu currently, I fear that we may see some microtransactions in the game. Again, I hope that these microtransactions are handled properly and they follow sort of like a Titanfall 2's type of business model. If that's the case, I'm good with that for all those who are unfamiliar with the Titanfall 2 business model. Essentially, players could buy cosmetics, but they were outright purchases, not loot boxes, and those purchases had no impact on the real game. As long as that remains to be the case, then I'm fine with there being microtransactions. It just shouldn't be a thing that, you know, hurts the overall gameplay value of the game. That's my thoughts on the whole microtransaction potential that I saw in this game when I saw those rarity values attached to those cosmetics. But guys, in closing, I'm really excited for this game in its final version. I really enjoyed playing this beta over the weekend. There'll be another beta launching later in August, so do keep an eye out for that one there, guys, if you're interested in playing this game. The beta, by the time this video goes out, will be closing, and it is only for pre-order members, so do keep that in mind. Yeah, it just feels like a solid addition to the Insurgency franchise. I think they've taken the focuses and improved the game where it needs to be improved and left the mechanics that worked well where they are and haven't toyed with them in any way, shape or form. And that right there is how to build a good sequel, in my humble opinion. If it's not broke, don't fix it, and if it is broke, then obviously fix it and add things where you can. I think the developers here have done a great job at finding that balance and creating what appears to be the groundwork for a very healthy sequel when it launches later in the year, with PC gamers getting their hands on it very, very shortly, and console guys getting their hands on it in early 2019, so guys, do keep an eye out for that. Anyway guys, if you enjoyed today's video, those are my thoughts on Insurgency Sandstorm. If you enjoyed today's video, then do not hesitate to backhand that like button, and if you're new to the channel, then in the meantime, backhand that subscribe button and the bell notification button in the process to keep up to date with all things that I'm doing here on YouTube. It would be greatly appreciated, guys. Also, feel free to follow me on Twitch. It's where you'll be able to find me playing all the games and just hanging out with you guys in a much more relaxed fashion. I do enjoy sharing some time with you guys on Twitch, so do not hesitate to go and follow me there as well. And all my social media links and my Discord link are also in the description down below, guys, for you to have a look at in your own time. Once again, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I'll be seeing you all next time. Have a good one, guys. Take care.